Okay, picking up where we left off on page 220. I think we're kind of done with the disaster recovery. We can kind of move on. So 221, they talk about wireless security. And so if you have a wireless router or an access point, this is probably the appropriate term, there's some sort of encryption settings that you should have. The very first encryption settings were just called WEP, and I'm not even going to bother to tell you what the acronym is. That's not really important. It's all just alphabet soup. The bottom line is you should always use the latest and greatest version of whatever encryption they have. WPA2 is a good one. And so I've got all this encryption turned on, and so I'm in halfway decent shape. But if a guy really wanted to be able to break your encryption for your wireless, they probably could. Given enough time, they could do it. So let's talk about, I go to Starbucks, and I'm hooked up to their wireless, and I don't have any password at all. It's just wide open. So is that a good thing? No, not at all. You basically should harden your device to not have any access coming into your device. And if you just want to surf the web, that'd be great. But don't go to Blackboard and log in. Don't go to your bank and log in. Don't go to any place where there's a name or password. And remember how sometimes the names and passwords are stored by your browser, so you don't really remember that there's a name and a password being done. So let's say you just went to this website you always go to, and then it actually had a name and password that got sent because it was stored. If I'm listening in, I know a valid name and password for you. And more than likely, you're not very diligent. And more than likely, you're using that name and that password for one heck of a lot of websites. So I just poke around for Chase and all the banks in the area trying that name and password combination, right? Okay, so Starbucks, kind of a scenario, and of course I'm picking on Starbucks, but you know what I'm talking about. An internet cafe where there's no password is bad news. What about I go to a conference and they have the password up on the screen? If you want to connect to our wireless, here, use Kumquat. That's the password for the wireless. Is that any better? Not really. If everyone knows the password, it's not that much better than having no password. Okay, the differences are very, very minor. Okay, very minor. And once again, be careful. So, even with the best intentions, if you're not at home, then don't go to websites with names and passwords. Okay, cool. Let's continue. On page 224, they talk about ethics and society. Computer ethics is the moral guidelines that govern the use of computers, mobile devices, And that's kind of an issue, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail in just a second. But then they kind of spin off about the fact that not all data on the on the web is correct. Really? You mean they did not find Bigfoot, and they did not recover, aliens in some crash? Wow, who would have thought? Yes, let's talk about how Wikipedia works for just a second. Wikipedia is actually a pretty cool system. There's a website, and I can go there and put in whatever I want. So let's say I'm going to Wikipedia. And let's say I'm going to look up, I don't know, Jesse James. Okay, so I go to Jesse James. And let's say that in here, they talk about Jesse James was, born on September 5th, 1847. Well, let's just say, for example, that I am the world's renowned authority on Jesse James. Okay, I've written several books on the topic, and I've recovered the family Bible that talks about when he was born, and he was not born on the 5th. He was actually born on the 7th. Okay, and so the website is wrong. And so I go in here and I edit this, because that's what Wikipedia is all about. You can go in and edit things. So I edit this and I change this to a 7. And then I go back in a couple days later and it's back to being a 5. And I go, what's going on? So I send them a note saying, hey, I'm the world's authority on Jesse James, and I know that the answer is 7. And they're going to say, we go by majority rules. So if the vast majority of people think that the answer is 5, even if they're wrong, 5 is what's going to show up on the web page. Okay? So Wikipedia does not have an authority kind of system. They don't have a grading scale about you're a moron, you're a genius. Okay? It doesn't do that. All it has is majority rules. And so if the majority of people think the wrong answer is correct, that's what's going to show up. Okay? That's the reason why professors everywhere do not want you to cite Wikipedia in any papers, is because, yes, there are errors in Wikipedia, known errors, that they will not change. Okay? Cool. Let's continue. Let's talk about ethics in society, since that's really what the topic is. You know, intellectual property refers to the unique or original work or ideas such as invention, arts, and writing. Intellectual property rights are the rights for which the creators are entitled. That makes sense. And so a copyright protects any tangible form of expression. And so copyrights were originally designed for written works, you know, musical scores and books and things of that nature. And so they had to kind of tweak them, you know, tweak the laws a smidgen to handle software and application stuff. So digital rights management, DRM. In some circles, DRM is a dirty word, because it put restrictions on your computer, what you could and couldn't do. It's a strategy to prevent illegal distribution of movies, music, and other content. Okay. So let's continue. On page 226, they talk about the code of conduct. And the code of conduct for doing stuff on the computer, I mean, this is just simple stuff, right? This is like the golden rule things. You know, technology may not be used to harm other people, you know, that kind of stuff. Come on. I mean, if you live in corporate America, you probably have one of these things, and maybe it'll be a little bit more robust than this, but you know, this is kind of simple child stuff. You know, I mean, this is what you would tell a kindergartner, right? Okay, so I'm going to move on. They talk about, on 227, they talk about green computing, and green computing, of course, it has to do with making the machine more environmental friendly. Now, if I have a machine that takes 1,000 watts to operate, then that's okay if that's what you want, but perhaps you can do an awful lot of computing without having 1,000 watts. Maybe 100 watts would work just as well. And so green computing is all about reducing the amount of power it takes, producing the amount of heat that the machine generates, and to include the toxic chemicals in manufacture, the toxic chemicals that are in the product, whether I have user serviceable parts and things of that nature. Now, green computing is very important when you're having data centers, because data centers, their number one cost is not the hardware and the software, it's the electricity. That's their number one cost of doing business. On the bottom of page 227, they talk about information privacy. Refers to the rights of individuals and companies to deny or restrict the collection and use of information about them. So if somebody has information about me, I have a reasonable expectation of privacy that information won't get sent out. Now, there are huge databases out there that can contain all sorts of stuff. For example, Google maintains a history of all of my Google searches. And so they're going to find out what kind of porn that I like. I mean, what kind of websites that I go to. Just kidding. In other words, they're going to know an awful lot about me. And so, does that disturb me? Am I upset that they know that I like certain types of, I don't know, whatever, movies? Then yeah, that if that concerns you, then yeah, those are privacy kind of issues, aren't they? So information privacy, once again, there's a goofy little chart there that kind of goes through it all, and it's not all that impressive. I'm going to skip that section. But some companies build profiles. Every time you go to Amazon and you buy a book, they're going to think, you know, he likes this kind of book, so the next time I go to Amazon, they say, may we also suggest? And there's some other similar books. How'd they do that? Well, yeah, they build a profile. They have a profile of me. My buying habits, my search habits on Amazon are well known to them, and so they're pushing targeted advertisement to me to suggest similar products the next time I return. Now, I will tell you, this is kind of funny, because I have a Kindle, right, and I buy books. So I buy technical books, right, and my wife buys mystery books. And so she'll go onto the Kindle, and they'll say, may we also represent, suggest? It'll be some book on, the C#, and she'll go, "What the heck is that?" And I say, "Just ignore it. Just go into your mystery books." So they've got us kind of bundled together here. It's kind of funny. Okay, let's continue. So, you filled out a form on some website. They got a lot of information about you. They got, where you live and what your name is, and, what credit card that you got, all that kind of good stuff. So let's talk about the cookies. So your browser could store tiny bits of information. Now, I'm not talking about the profile kind of information like Amazon. We're talking about tiny little things. Like, when was the last time you visited a website? Okay? Stored in a thing called a cookie. And a cookie is just a text file that your browser used to store tiny pieces of information. And for some reason, there was some mass hysteria a few years back about, cookies. And so a lot of people were told, turn off your cookies on your browser. And I never did. I thought that was kind of overreaction. So cookies are generally kind of sort of safe. And it stores some small amount of information about things that are going on a particular website. I don't think they're bad. So that allows for personalization. So when I come back, again, they know who I am. Welcome back, Emmett, kind of a thing. Stores usernames and passwords, which could be bad. Assists in online shopping, yeah. Tracks how often a user has been to a website, yeah. So, for example, I go to these websites that have a forum, right? And so when I go there, it shows me all the forum listings that are new since the last time I logged in. That's pretty useful for me. Otherwise, I won't know. I mean, I can't remember the last time I went there. So if I look at this list, I go, and it has it in bold, and so I click on the ones that I have not read before. Makes sense. That's done through a cookie. So I think cookies are good things, not bad things. Okay, let's continue. I'm not going to go through cookies too much more. Let's skip on to page 231, talking about phishing. And of course, phishing is with a PH, just because it's cute. What that basically means is I target, particularly like an email. I send you an email that looks very, very convincing. It looks like it's coming from my bank. I mean, it's very convincing. It's got all the right stuff on it, and it basically says, we've had an issue here. Please go to this website and change your password immediately. And so it'll provide a little link. And so if you followed that, you weren't actually going to the bank. You were going to their little website, and you changed your password, ha, ha, ha. And he comes back and says, thank you for changing your password, and then they turn around and steal all the money out of your account. So yes, phishing is all about getting you to think that something is legitimate that is not. So it's really, and some of them are good. I mean, I looked at several. I've gotten some that I went, I'm not absolutely certain if this is phishing or not. And I've had to call, send them the real company an email saying, did you guys send this? And they'll say, no, you're the 417th person who called and asked for that. Spyware. Spyware, of course, is software that's installed on my machine to track something about me. Track where I go, track, my passwords and account numbers and things of that nature. Adware, of course, is the thing about generally harmless, other than from an annoyance perspective, where they just hit me with ads. Social engineering. Now, social engineering is a very effective thing. Well, let me give you an example. I put on work clothes and a hard hat, and I walk in the door, and I say, there's some sort of alarm going off in your server room. Could you let me in? And so the person says, oh, sure, okay. So they go up to the server door, and they type in the code in the cipher lock and open it up and said, okay, and they send you right on in. Well, that's social engineering. I have convinced people that I'm legitimate, and they have volunteered to give me access to a system where they really should have said, wait, can I see some ID? Or at a mere minimum, I'm going to stay in the room with you when you're in the server room. Okay, something of that nature. Okay, so this is a good place to stop for the 15-minute mark. We'll pick this thing up again in just a few.